Hi everyone on Facebook, this is Steve Barrett, Editor-in-Chief at PRWeek. We're about to get going with our weekly podcast, The PRWeek. We have a great guest this week. It's my colleague, Marc Iskowitz, the Editor-in-Chief of our sister title, MM&M. Hey Marc, how are you doing?
Great, Steve.
Welcome. How are you? Yeah, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you on board, and looking forward to finding out more about our joint initiative. We've got a great new issue coming out, a health issue, haven't we, next week? So
we sure do. Looking
forward to chatting to Marc about that. And we've got our regular correspondent, Frank Washkhuch here, PRWeek's news editor. How are you doing, Frank?
I'm well, thanks for having me on.
That's always a pleasure. Are you recovered from your
my bout with
illness?
Let's not get too far.
No, let's not go into too much detail.
But I'm coming around.
Takes a lot to knock you down, but you're back up and fighting now.
Yeah, I took a bad cheeseburger in this case, so yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
See, it is the health issue, this, of the PRWeek. So yeah, we're going to get going. If you've got any comments, please append them at the bottom. Any feedback, be nice to us. We're doing our best, and we will be going for about 25-30 minutes. So yeah, enjoy the show. About to start recording. Hello and welcome to the PRWeek, PRWeek's regular weekly roundup of everything that matters in the worlds of PR and communications. My name's Steve Barrett. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of PRWeek, going to guide you gently through the next 25, maybe 30 minutes of chat about big topical issues. And we have another special podcast this week. We were out on location last week at the NAB show. Now we've got Marc Iskowitz as our guest, who's the Editor-in-Chief of our sister title, MM&M. How you doing, Marc?
Great, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on board. We work very closely in the office, and we're working closely together on a joint health issue, aren't we, which we're putting out next week, including our second annual Health Influencer 50 list. So it's exciting to be working together on that.
Absolutely. Pulling our resources is always exciting.
Yeah, it is. And it's been made a lot easier by our new office arrangement where we're working closely together. So we're going to find out about that. And we've got Frank Washkhuch here, our news editor. How you doing, Frank?
I'm well. I think the one caveat to what Marc just said, though, is he has to listen to me all day.
Well,
is really...
but we all do.
Yeah,
and
can probably be distracting.
But we all enjoy listening to your banter and your approach to news editing. Yeah, what am I saying? Yeah, lots of stories this week as well. Breaking some good stuff, some nice analysis stuff, some loads of people moves at the moment, aren't there? Lots of interesting things.
It's that end of the year time.
It seems to be, yes. So yeah, very interesting. So this is going to be a health special. We'll talk about the government response to the opioid crisis. They're finally sort of addressing that. It's one of the biggest crises in the country, actually, and probably hasn't got as much attention as it deserves. We'll talk about agency structures in the health pharma space. We'll talk about W2O Group. They have rebranded. They brought all their agencies under the W2O banner. We'll talk about the holding company's Q3 financials, some of which have been out this week. Not brilliant reading, I guess, but we'll analyse that. And we'll ask about earned media and is it rising in the health space? It seems to be becoming more prevalent. And anything else that catches our attention. Marc, first of all, before we start, just tell us a little bit about MM&M. What's the primary focus of the title, the brand, and what sort of content are you writing and for what type of reader?
Sure. So MM&M, thank you, Steve, for the kind introduction, by the way.
It's my pleasure.
MM&M is the healthcare marketing title of Haymarket Media, and we are a primarily US-based publication, but we do have a global reach in terms of a lot of our readers being overseas. But we don't have any overseas markets or offices or bureaus per se. But we specialize, our content, our sweet spot, if you will, is marketing content that's going to help pharma marketers do their jobs better on a daily basis. So that might span the latest news about transparency and the concern about programmatic advertising and ad adjacencies, all the way through to what's happening on the policy front and how that might affect pharma marketers doing their jobs on the ground. We're 12 months a year in print. We have a website, mmm-online.com. We have a newly designed email newsletter. We're active on all the
very good at this too.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So,
is it mainly pharma focused then, or are you covering other areas of the medical marketing space?
So it's a great question. We traditionally have also spanned medical device as well. And we've expanded the brand's footprint of late to encompass health tech as well, because really the primary goal of pharma marketers these days is to try to expand beyond their silos and to look outward to test new mechanisms, new tools that can help them become more customer-centric in their business. I'm sorry to use a lot of jargon there, but basically their products are suffering in some cases from homogeneity. There's a lot of genericization in the industry now, so anything they can do.
Easy for you to say.
Practiced a lot. If you can say MM&M.
Yeah, that can be a tongue teaser. Yeah. And that stands for medical marketing and media. Yeah. So unlike PRWeek, where we do concentrate on earned media, although who's to say what advertising, PR, and media and digital are now? They're all merging, aren't they? And we talk about that all the time. But you very specifically focus down on all areas of medical marketing, whether it's paid, whether it's, like you said, programmatic, and media as well. So yeah, lots of good stuff. There are lots of big trends happening. It's one of the biggest areas of marketing generally, isn't it? It's one of the biggest areas of government spend. There's obviously lots to chat about in that respect. And we do work together on some stories, don't we? And there is some crossover between our titles, so we've been working together more closely. And one of the fruits of our labours, if you like, is our special health issue for PRWeek. But that's all built around a list that we created last year called the Health Influencer 50. What was the sort of thinking behind that list? Does the world need another list? Well, there's a lot out there, but actually this was a really interesting one, wasn't it? Just explain a little bit of the thinking behind that.
Sure, and I'm often asked, what is the difference between this list and another one of our power lists, which is the Transformers list, the healthcare Transformers. So obviously today, healthcare is being disrupted, from all facets of the biopharma life cycle, from R&D and clinical trials all the way through to the supply chain and marketing in the middle. Or if it's not being disrupted, it's ripe for disruption. So the entrepreneurs and new entrants are doing that, the Apples, the Googles, the Samsungs, etc., the startups that our brand's footprint is growing to encompass. But the way I see the health influencers these are the people who have the prescience, the perspective, and the pull, the influence to get other people to know when the time is right to seize on these opportunities and to get their organizations on board with them.
Yeah, so the Influencer 50 is more the power players, whereas the Transformers are maybe the younger pros who are really changing things. Would that be a good summary?
Right. There are some crossover in terms of the Transformers have some people who have been digital for a while and helping their organizations become more digital. Pharma, we like to say, is kind of 5 years behind the curve when it comes to adopting digital. But that is a good assessment.
Why is that? Why is pharma 5 years behind? Is that because it's a heavily regulated sector?
That has a lot to do with it, and everything has to be cleared by the FDA, and oftentimes marketing messaging has to be cleared by the FDA. Oftentimes, not always, but a lot of people are nervous about getting a slap on the wrist from DDMAC, which is the branch of FDA that oversees pharma marketing and promotions. So some of the newer forays, for instance, into social media, have invoked the wrath of DDMAC, and so there's a lot of caution in the industry.
And what is DDMAC?
Sounds like a rapper, Mark. Or it should be.
Yeah, it's the Office of Drug Marketing and Promotion. Not sure if they have that acronym correct, but
a lot of acronyms floating around. So.
Yes.
Okay.
So obviously, drug pricing is a big issue in pharma. How do you cover that issue on MM&M, and how does that impact the way companies market?
Sure. So we've covered that issue from the standpoint of the drug companies that have issued price limits on their drugs, as well as some of the efforts to work with payers to get drugs on formulary, and in some cases offer rebates in return for that kind of access. Unfortunately, there's a lot of obfuscation in the prices that are paid for drugs and the way they're reimbursed, and the role of pharmacy benefits managers vis-a-vis payers and pharma these days. So that's all fodder for our reporting.
How does that impact the way they actually market and tell their stories then? I mean, it's a tricky topic, isn't it? So how are they addressing that in their marketing? Or
Sure.
in their general business?
Well, we see an emphasis on cures now. Pharma's not afraid to use the word cures, especially with the treatment for Hep C, for instance, which has shrunk the population of people with that disease. And on the researchers behind the molecules, pharma, the trade group is out with a new or a relatively new campaign that puts a spotlight on the researchers behind the drugs to kind of broaden the discussion, if you will, beyond simply price.
Yeah, sure. Frank, from PRWeek's point of view, our issue, the next issue, and our online content will be solely focused on healthcare. Pretty much the whole issue is given over every element. How would you say the way we cover, well, say PRWeek covers healthcare differs from MM&M, and what are the biggest issues that we're seeing on a regular basis?
Well, MM&M certainly is more of a pharma focus, much more than we do, whereas I think we're talking about when it's something that's covered, whether it's through our healthcare beat or through our consumer or corporate beat, it could be something as wide-ranging as Johnson & Johnson facing down lawsuits about, talc and products. It could be about a more consumer-focused over-the-counter drug campaign or things like that. So I think in some ways we're a little bit more consumer-y than MM&M in some ways, right? Would you agree?
The J&J story obviously is OTC related. You guys sometimes dip your hands into RX stuff, but yeah, that sounds like we go kind of deeply in the weeds with the RX stuff.
Yeah, I don't want to say the pharma stuff is over our head, but we tend to focus on things that you would read about more in the general media when it comes to healthcare as well.
Right,
so,
that is true. Right.
Yes.
Okay, well, look out for this issue. It launches on November the 1st. We launched online, and we've got a joint microsite, actually. So it's you can obviously find it via each title's individual website, but the joint microsite is healthinfluencer50.com, and that will be live on November the 1st. And you'll be able to see who's on the health influencer list, the top 50 players, power players in the marketing world for pharma and healthcare. So do look out for that. Very exciting stuff, and there's a lot more health content on PRWeek as well. And of course, MM&M does regularly is clearly talking about health all the time. So we're really excited about this partnership and working together more closely, and it's a good chance to do that, if only once a year, although we do share stuff at other times of the year. So let's get into some of the issues. And Marc, we've picked up on some of the issues that we've done deep dives into for the issue, actually. And the first one we're going to talk about is the opioid crisis. Terrible crisis, really, isn't it? It's killing thousands of people a year, and it's leading to people to get into heroin misuse as well. So it's a terrible crisis. The government, in fact, this week is apparently putting some measures together to put a communications and advertising campaign together to try and address this crisis. Some might say a little bit late, but better late than never. What's your take on the whole crisis, and what's the implication there for companies that sell drugs, pain-killing drugs, such as Purdue Pharma and others, because obviously there is a need for drugs like that. I think that's accepted, but how do they approach that from a branding point of view?
Sure. Well, as you said, first of all, the President's Commission on Combating Drug Addiction and the Opioid Crisis is expected to also make a formal declaration this week that the opioid epidemic is a national emergency. So that will add more buzz around it, so to speak, as I heard one commentator say, although with the epidemic already garnering front page coverage everywhere you look, it doesn't necessarily need more buzz, but we may see some movement on the federal level there. In the meantime, this morning, as you know, there was a Committee on Energy and Commerce hearing to get an update on efforts to address the crisis. So there's federal agencies spanning FDA, CDC, DEA weighed in. And the reason I bring that up is because Dr. Scott Gottlieb, who's the newly appointed commissioner of the FDA, was one of the speakers at this committee meeting this morning, this hearing, and he talked about how FDA wants to facilitate research into the possible expansion of product labeling, which would allow for basically that the product label is basically what pharma companies and marketers of products use as the basis for their marketing claims. So if those product labels were to expand, that might give the marketers more of a leg to stand on when it comes to helping out, contributing to the way this crisis is addressed, and that could mean a label expansion in terms of the products that are used to combat the addiction or to reverse overdoses, or the opioid products themselves, toward everybody who has an addiction, sort of widening the net, if you will, so that they could have a broader population to market toward. We also, funny you mentioned it, we had we asked 5 or 6 people in the health special issue how they would view the future of opioid marketing, and so we have a range of people weighing in on that, from marketers to PR to state legislators, and some called for a radical departure from past efforts, including calling on marketers to be ultra responsible in their efforts. Others suggested a tweaking of the old model, but with a new focus on speaking to the paths to addiction, keeping in mind that RX drug use is often the road to addiction. So being very blunt and targeted, and nipping the problem in the bud.
Yeah, if in some countries marketing drugs is certainly on broadcast TV is illegal. It's not here, and you have the ads and you have the people who talk very fast at the end with the disclaimers. How is broadcast being used? Is that still going to be a big sort of area where companies are getting their messages over? And what are the issues there, and what is the responsibility of the drug companies as well? Obviously they want to raise awareness of their products, but they also have to do that in a responsible manner. So that must be a big issue in the way they market products.
Are you talking about in the U.S. or
in the U.S.? Yeah.
Right. This is a problem that is fairly unique to the U.S. Although the people that weighed in this morning from some of the federal agencies, I think it was the DEA, called out a lot of overseas manufacturers of synthetic opioids as being part of the problem, and they're really trying to target them. What is the responsibility of marketers in broadcast? Obviously, I think there's going to be more going forward of a emphasis on prescriber education rather than broadcast education from the. That's one facet, but we might see a renewed push, as you point out. It's a good question. If the RX drug use is the road to addiction, we could see agencies like the Substance and Mental Health Administration backing efforts, or the CDC backing broadcast efforts, public service messages, that kind of thing, around proper use of prescription opioids.
Sure, and it's doctors as well that need to get the messages as well, isn't it? Because if I think of, say, antibiotics, they were given away sort of like sweeties at one point, weren't they? And they would be given out to really cure everything, and then all of a sudden people are noticing, well, there's antibiotics in the water supply and things like that because they're so ubiquitous, but also they're not working anymore because the people are becoming immune to them. So is part of the marketing of the drug companies marketing to doctors as well? Has there been a problem with responsible prescribing?
Well, there has been some well-reported, incidents where drug reps were overly aggressive in courting prescribing from doctors. High prescribers are, the targets traditionally for pharmaceutical companies for obvious reasons.
Sure.
And those who prescribe opioids, whether they're orthopedists or they're primary care doctors or whatnot, I don't know the specifics of the specialists that were targeted, but there have been a lot of high-profile incidents where there's some overreaching taking place, put it that way.
Well, it's a big story and one we'll cover on PRWeek and on MM&M, so do check us out to see where that goes. Frank, let's kick off a little chat about agency structures in the health space. And I suppose a good starting point there is the W2O rebrand, which happened this week. They a very well-known and well-regarded agency group in the health space that we talk to on PRWeek and MM&M, but they've they've done something. Tell us what they've done, and then maybe link us into a chat about the overall health agency sector.
Right, so W2O Group is rebranding all 5 of its subsidiaries, and those are Twist, Pure, WCG Sentient, and Marketing, which is one I always have a little bit of trouble with. So they're going to all be rebranded with the W2O name in front of them. So you're going to have W2O WCG, W2O Pure, things like that. One reason they're doing this is because they're looking to cut down on confusion about, what network these agencies are a part of, whether they're linked together, whether they work together, things like that. And they are combining a lot of the back-end things too, data and analytics, things of that nature, some P&Ls.
So it's a lot of that, I guess, it's down to the acquisition strategy over the last 2 or 3 years, isn't it, or a few years, where they've acquired a bunch of agencies. Often you let them run as in their form when you bought them, and then once they're integrated, you want to brand them more to your mothership, if you like, right. And that's what they've done. So
right, and a lot of that is recent. Pure, Sentient, and Marketing were all brought in last year, and I think Twist was created in 2011, so most of them kind of recently added subsidiaries.
Very successful company. I mean, they've grown at 30 to 40% a year, I think, as long as I've been in the States, which is nearly 8 years, and in the agency business report we do every year, they've posted amazing growth and right. Continue to do so, and they're very much a health and tech specialist agency, to your point earlier, Marc. Do you bump into them a lot on the MM&M as well?
Only at the PRWeek Awards.
Oh, yes, okay, yeah. Oh, of course, they're called W20 Group. No, sorry, only joking. But yeah, interesting stuff. But on a wider, looking at agencies more widely, Marc, what's the difference between what are the big trends there, and what's the difference between the agencies you might cover and us? But also, there's these big umbrella arrangements being set up, almost horizontal across networks like WPP Health and Wellness, Havas Health and You, Omnicom's got one, Publicis has got one. What do you think is driving that? And is that driven by the clients essentially?
It's a great question. I think that what's driving that is the not necessarily anything new on one hand. There's always a desire, I think, to make it easier for clients to buy the services, right? So when you all roll up under one brand, rather than having unique brands, that does make it more accessible to the clients. So that's sort of a recurring theme that we've heard over the years, and I guess the pendulum has swung back toward that. Obviously, this is no news to any of your listeners that there's a ton of competition in terms of non-traditional players encroaching on agencies' traditional turf. For instance, consultancies. So sure. Now is definitely a time to make your services easier to buy, right, and to recognize who you're buying from. There's also concerns about transparency of advertising. In the pharma industry, we're just dipping toes into programmatic advertising. This is one area where we kind of are not so behind the curve because everybody else is kind of going through the throes of finding out that bots are viewing their ads and not necessarily real people, and that takes on added significance in healthcare because when you're trying to target, say, a group of oncologists, your ad network promises you more oncologists than actually exist, there's something wrong there. So this is a time when it's good to have clear lines of identification. But my question there, whenever we see one of these kinds of rebrands, is can you maintain the individual brand's personality while still rolling them up under one P&L? And so I think the jury is still somewhat out on that question.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that feature reflects that. There's a case study on W2O actually where they have one business across their units because their clients want to see fewer agencies. So they want to reduce the number of brands they're interacting with. They want to reduce the amount of infighting between the agencies for budgets, and so that is, I think, partly driving this trend. But it's still jury out. It's still early stages for these new big umbrella structures for sure. And but lots of trends there. You've got you can check out a feature on that in the health special. You can check out a feature on the opioid crisis too, as well. And we'll come on to the final feature soon. But Frank, while we're on agencies, it's Q3 financial season. Right. So Omnicom has reported, right. Publicis and IPG as well. I think we're just waiting for WPP.
That's correct.
What are the trends? Not great stories, even at IPG, were they?
No, it's another down quarter. IPG's CPG unit, which has most of the PR firms, was down 5%. The PR firms in particular did a little bit better than that, but still had a down quarter. So, they had a bad quarter. Omnicom obviously had another bad quarter. And there's some speculation there, you could say.
Yeah, John Wren, the CEO, is becoming interesting listening to, isn't he, on the analyst calls, because he seems to have it in for one particular PR agency. And
it's starting to feel a little bit like a reality TV show of tune in next week and see who we've gotten rid of, or something like that. But he, again, for the second straight quarter, Wren has been on the Omnicom earnings call saying that they're going to change the leadership at one agency in particular this time. So something we're watching very closely, obviously. This comes a quarter after he did the farmers and hunters bit.
Yeah, we need more hunters, fewer farmers.
Or too many hunters and farmers in one place, or something like that. Yeah, I don't know.
I think he wants more hunters. He wants a more aggressive.
That would seem to be it. Yeah. So we're watching very closely to see where the change happens.
Mark, in the PR world, it's kind of possible to determine how PR is doing. I mean, it's often within a group, whether that's the CPG and CMG and IPG. There's too many acronyms here.
Though they were down in part because of CPG spending being lower.
Right, okay. See, I knew there was a link. And then it's Omnicom, it's the...
Omnicom has DUS.
DUS.
Which houses the Omnicom PR group, which is made up of 10 agencies. However, Omnicom does break out PR individually.
Right.
Which is good for us.
Yeah, but it's more difficult with health, isn't it, or pharma marketing and agencies, because it's kind of disparate and spread across a lot more, and you can't really say, well, it's up and down quite as easily.
Right, I agree, especially because we're seeing a lot of the mainline agencies take on a lot of health business. So, for instance, J. Walter Thompson, in the WPP group, or FCB New York and IPG, these groups will often take on a lot of business from this pharmaceutical companies. So it's all mixed in.
Yeah, we've seen Ogilvy, I think it was, to say that at least 40%, Ogilvy PR, when they split out disciplines, said that 40 to 50% of their revenues came from health in the broadest sense of the words, so not just pharma. Yeah, so let's finish with this chat about earned media, because the last feature in the special is talking about how earned media is being used a lot more in the pharma space, Mark. So tell us a little bit about that, and why do you think that's happening now?
And who is that fellow in the picture right there? He appears to be wearing a cape of some sort.
He's from Modern Family, Frank. He's a cultural icon. I'm
That's
surprised.
a TV show?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Do you not watch the television? Just live sports?
Sorry.
Yeah. Live sports and the news channels.
Yes.
Yes, indeed.
Eric Stone Street, remember that name?
I will. Okay.
So he's...
That's just gone to prove the old adage, every picture needs a caption, in my editing book. But anyway, I was overruled on that one. But yeah, that's illustrating the feature, the media feature. So over to you, Mark.
Sure.
After the rude interruption.
No, not at all. Not at all.
It's what I'm good at.
Yeah.
So why do we think there could be more emphasis on earned media? Because the case study that this feature spotlights is one about Bristol Myers Squibb's Opdivo, which is an immuno-oncology drug. And this is a relatively new class of the products that basically harnesses the body's immune system to fight cancer cells. And there's another competitor from Merck, but Opdivo was the first out of the gate on launch, and Merck has since, through smart approvals that it's garnered along the way, has kind of jumped into the lead from a market share perspective. That's what it's all about, and with these products is how many tumors can you get approval for, starting off with melanoma and then going to lung, and how big are those patient populations. So we've seen Merck really kind of seize the lead there. But Opdivo from Bristol Myers Squibb, which was the progenitor, the forerunner, the first-in-class product, has really utilized an interesting combination of earned media and paid media. After a short period of paid media, they debuted their earned media campaign, and Ready, Raise, Rise, and it's garnered a lot of national press coverage. And basically, obviously, you know this better than I, the use of earned media is really good for educational purposes. And when you have a brand new product class, like immuno-oncology was 3 years ago, it's good to prime the market through education, and then you kind of pave the way for your paid media, which comes in later. They did a little bit of paid media first, and then bowed the earned media, which was interesting. And now it's kind of kicked into higher gear in year 3. So they've kind of pulled the levers in an interesting way there. Maybe because it's oncology, it's a little different. But we think that this could be a good time for more use of earned media, because there's so many new product classes coming online. You have gene therapy,
Very noisy.
It's a noisy area in the R&D space, and it's only going to get noisier, and I think that's to the benefit of the patient community.
Yeah. Long live earned media, and let's see more of it. Yeah, we agree on PRWeek. Marc, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for joining us. Really enjoyed finding out more about MM&M and the health issue. Frank, always a pleasure, my friend. Have a good week. I think you're doing the podcast next week, so I'm
looking forward to it.
Yes, so are the listeners, I would imagine. So, just before we go, a couple of housekeeping announcements. We launched the PRWeek Global Awards this week, so do check those out. I think you've got until January to enter those. PRWeekglobalawards.com. Our fantastic event that's, I think it's in its 5th year now. We'll be handing those out in London in May. The Hall of Fame dinner is on December the 4th in New York City. It's going to be a bumper edition. It's going to be a great event. Fantastic honorees, and also we're going to kick off our 20th anniversary celebrations as they kick in 2018, so it's going to be a really great night. There's a great video online of Harold Burson, the legend himself, who I hope will be at the Hall of Fame dinner. He's a member of the Hall of Fame. He's launched his book, and we did a video with him. Bunch of videos from the Swipe Right conference, which happened a couple of weeks ago, an excellent event. Perry Simpson, the man behind the podcast dials, has put those together for your delectation, so check those out. And check out the sort of debate around the PR Compact, Richard Edelman's suggestion last week. Very interesting story that he suggested that we need more regulation and more attention to ethics in PR, and he's called on the trade bodies to get involved in that. Tell us what you think, either at the bottom of this Facebook or on the article. I wrote a blog about it last Friday, or just sort of send us an email, but that's going to be in a continuing conversation. But that's all we've got time for, I'm afraid, this week. We'll see you next time on the PR Week.